Thank you all for attending today. My talk is titled CPACE for Affordable Housing, Multiplexes, and Apartments. My name is Lori Harrer. I have a master's in science, and I am the program and volunteer coordinator for 350 Deschutes. As you've just learned, CPACE can be used for many different kinds of buildings and businesses, and what we're going to focus on in my talk is how CPACE can be used to benefit building owners and tenants of multiplexes, apartments, and affordable housing. Now, as an organization, 350 Deschutes has begun working on CPACE, and as many other organizations, we're still in the process of learning what it can and can't do, but we're very excited that it can indeed be used for affordable housing and multiplexes here in Central Oregon. CPACE is an excellent program for funding clean energy improvements, and just in 2019 alone, CPACE allowed for the creation of 22,000 jobs, $2.79 billion in economic investments, and reduced 3 million metric tons of carbon. And that's the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road. So it's a great program that can do a lot of good. I'm going to start by talking about why we need CPACE for multiplexes. Without CPACE, owners of multifamily apartments and affordable housing units have limited access to capital. Just making energy upgrades is just too expensive. And often these owners have lack of capacity. They're not experts in energy or in energy efficiency. They're just owners of these buildings. And often these buildings have lots of deferred maintenance costs that have to be paid for and fixed before the owners can actually get to the process of upgrading their buildings. But with CPACE, they can enjoy fixed lower rates on loans. They have lower maintenance and repair rates for heating, cooling, plumbing, and repairs because they will be installing these newer upgraded systems, and they get an increased value in their property. By using CPACE to make energy efficiency upgrades, owners are able to enjoy increased building equity, cities get increased tax value from these buildings, and the tenants are able to enjoy lower energy and water bills, which gives them a higher incentive to move in and stay in these buildings. And the bottom line is that clean energy upgrades reduce energy costs. A study in 2006 found that over a 30-year building life cycle, energy efficiency upgrades allowed residents to see utility cost savings of over $12,000. And over that same life cycle, building owners actually also got the benefit of cost savings of almost $3,000 because building owners often have to foot the bill for common areas, heating and cooling and lighting, hallways and entranceways. So both tenants and owners were able to see cost savings after making these energy efficiency upgrades. Here in Bend, Oregon, about 70% of the people who live in multiplex units are living on at or below the area median income. And in Bend, that area median income is about $60,000 to $70,000 a year. So this graph, which I got from the state and local energy data tool, shows the number of housing units that are renter occupied based on the percentage of area median income. So what you can see here is anybody who's at or below that 100% is at or below $60,000 per year. And low-income houses living in multiplexes here in Bend, Oregon have been found to spend between $600 and $1,000 on energy annually. So if you're on the lower end of this, if you're only making $20,000 or $30,000 a year, or maybe even less, that $600 to $1,000 spent on energy can be a big burden for that family. Anyone who pays 6% or more of their annual income on electricity, heating, cooling, etc. is considered energy burdened. Here in Oregon, about 27% of Oregonians are considered energy burdened, and most of them live out in central or eastern Oregon in these more rural areas. And out of those energy burdened Oregonians, only 17% actually get energy assistance. So many of these individuals have to choose between food, medicine, and paying the bills. So by making energy efficiency upgrades, we are helping reduce the burden on these families. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about what CPACE can do for multiplexes to help them make these energy efficiency upgrades. CPACE financing can be used to make energy efficiency upgrades such as lighting, doors and windows, plumbing and hot water heating, insulation and weather stripping, and heating and cooling. It can also be used to help with water conservation, things like low flow faucets and toilets, and irrigation. And finally, it can also make clean energy upgrades such as putting solar panels on the roof of a building. Here's a case study of an apartment complex in Michigan that was able to use CPACE financing to make some upgrades to their buildings back in 2018. They upgraded the lighting of the interior and exterior to be LED lights. They installed new furnaces, air conditioning systems, and installations. They also installed energy efficient toilets, low flow shower heads, and other water fixtures, as well as upgrading their water heating, all with CPACE financing, which both made the building more energy efficient, costing the residents less money, and also made their residents probably a lot more comfortable with that new air conditioning system. Here is another case study about CPACE financing being used for new construction. About $14.5 million in CPACE financing was approved for a new multifamily development in Los Angeles. And so with these upgrades that they made to the building that without CPACE financing, they would not have been able to fund, they're able to reduce electricity consumption by 211.93 megawatt hours. Water conservation, they're able to reduce by almost 4 million gallons, again, by using that CPACE financing to make upgrades to the building that would not have already been made. And another thing CPACE financing can cover is seismic strengthening. That's not something we need so much here in Central Oregon, but in places where it's necessary, CPACE funding can be used to make a building safer in the case of an earthquake. The last topic I would like to talk about is how we can use CPACE using the guidance from previous CPACE projects and the assistance from existing government programs. Organizations like Energy Star and Energy Trust of Oregon exist to help building owners assess which energy efficiency upgrades are best for them, their buildings, and their tenants. This allows them to choose options that will give them the most benefits for the time and money that they have to input to upgrade their building. The Vermont Energy Investment Corporation put together a set of guidelines and roadmaps for affordable multifamily housing projects using CPACE funding, and they base this on lessons learned from 15 completed CPACE funded projects. So new projects like ours out here in Central Oregon don't have to start blind. And the best advice for getting started from this document was to just start with simpler projects, and then once we have more experience, we can tackle on more complex projects. CPACE financing can be partnered with power purchase agreements for solar. And so what this does is the solar company is the one that installs and maintains the solar panels at little to no cost to the owner of the building, who then is able to pay a reduced rate for that solar power. These agreements usually end after about 20 years, and then at that point the system could be removed, given, or sold to the participant. And so what this provides for the owners and for the tenants of those buildings are lower power rates. They're able to overcome credit barriers because they don't have to front the cost of installing and maintain that solar power. And it increases the resiliency and sustainability of the building, as well as benefiting vulnerable communities. CPACE can be used in conjunction with HUD. This has been done for a small number of projects, mostly because these sorts of projects are fairly complex and CPACE is fairly new, but there is really big potential here, and people at the HUD offices are very excited to work with CPACE financing to find the right sorts of projects that they can move forward with. And when paired with solar, you can get really big benefits for the owners of these buildings. And the last partnership I'm going to talk about is CPACE with Rental Assistance Demonstrations, or RAD. This is a voluntary program within HUD that allows public housing agencies to access stable funding to make needed improvements to properties by converting them to privately owned units. Once they've made this RAD conversion, then they're open to HUD Section 8 funding contracts, which are either project-based vouchers or project-based rental assistance. And by doing this conversion, it's easier for the PHAs to borrow money. They can use low-income housing tax credits, and they are then able to use CPACE financing to make these much needed improvements. I would like to end my presentation with a quote from President Barack Obama on energy efficiency in houses and businesses. By bringing more energy efficient technologies to American homes and businesses, we won't just significantly reduce our energy demand, we'll put more money back in the pockets of hardworking Americans. The final and major takeaway I would like for you to get from my presentation here today is that CPACE can help multiplexes increase building quality and decrease energy costs, which is best for both building owners and tenants. Thank you again so much for listening to my talk today. 350 to shoots, and I would be happy to take questions.
We don't have any questions right now that I can think of or that I'm seeing in the Q&A. I do have a question for John. If you could, you mentioned that you would like to see a statewide administrator.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, what about cities or counties that are looking to establish or enact CPACE programs in their community? Would they be needing to set up an administrator, or could they work with you until, with the property fit administrator, until a statewide administrator could be found? What do you envision?
Thanks for that question, Dan. Yeah, we had initially hoped that Prosper Portland would be able to serve that role with other communities using the same mechanism that we have, which is an intergovernmental agreement, which is a really useful tool between governments that allows the sharing or transfer of various authorities. However, Prosper's charter prohibits them from playing that role outside of Multnomah County. And so we're really kind of a little bit, either a local city or county would have to develop their own administrative infrastructure or look to the private nonprofit sector to see if there's a provider or administrator that would be willing to serve their market, or we can, what I'm hoping is that we eventually develop a statewide model which would allow local jurisdictions to opt into a statewide program.
I think go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's how, the Connecticut, which probably has by far and away the most CPACE transactions nationally, that's the model. The Green Bank really serves as a statewide administrator, and a local jurisdiction authorizes the program locally, but all the sort of work of administering the program takes place at the statewide Green Bank.
And I think we have a question also that has come up that relates to this, in that there might be some costs involved in administering a program, and what reimbursement might there be for cities and counties that do administer these programs, and how, you mentioned the fees that are charged on the loans, how might those be used to help fund the administration?
Right, so Multnomah County, we don't get any money directly from the transactions, and because we did that deliberately in order to really keep the costs as low as possible. But somebody's got to get paid to keep the lights on for the program, so to speak, and that's Prosper Portland. So Prosper Portland made some of their own kind of capital outlays and investments into the program, but is recouping those costs through the transaction fees. A current fee is the 25 basis points, so 0.25% of the total transaction value. So I'm sorry, yeah, that I'm pretty sure that's right. And then they also charge a annual fee, and I think it's somewhere. I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong. It's 1% of the total project cost goes to Prosper Portland at closing, and then 0.25% of the outstanding balance annually as a transaction fee goes to Prosper Portland. So the transactions are generating money at closing, and then over the life of the transactions as well. So that's how Prosper gets paid for the work. So you really, in reality, there's kind of two major components. One is just sort of helping shepherd through the transactions to make sure they comply with the statutes and fit the program. Making sure capital providers can enroll, that kind of thing. But then there's the other kind of component of it, which is helping to spread the word. Maybe that won't be a big problem in Deschutes because there's such a wonderful organization like 350 around that can help spread the word. But you obviously have to go out and talk to building developers and people in the trades to tell them that this tool is available, explain to them how that works and how they can use it in their particular situations.
Well, you're right, John. A new program needs marketing and support all the way through. And so we have a question for, and I just want to make a comment that 0.25% annually and the 1% upfront as a loan fee, when you're looking at the high dollar amounts, that could definitely pay for the administration of the program. And it's really no different than any other loan fee that you might pay a lender. In fact, it seems like it's less. Would that be true?
Yeah, and it's I can't speak to that. I'm not I'm not super familiar with what kind of fees banks charge for commercial lenders for transaction costs. But I think that we're designing it as low as possible in order to encourage the use of the program.
Yes.
And that might be different if you had a for-profit entity administering the program on behalf of a community, because they might be looking to that. Well, they'll be looking for that sweet spot too, because they don't get paid until there's transactions. So I think there's motivation there.
Yes, and I don't know which one of you might want to answer this, Lori or John, but I guess seeing as how you're on the screen now, John, I'll ask you first. We have a question from Angelina. Would a micro hydro power qualify for CPACE financing?
I don't, it's kind of hard to answer in the abstract because it has to be tied to the real property. So I could imagine it being, some kind of a farm, has an irrigation, where it's part of their industrial plant. Let's say it's part of their commercial activity. It could potentially qualify, but it's really going to be dependent on if it's tied to real property.
Yes, and that's the whole thing too that you mentioned. A micro hydro has been really used with great success in Central Oregon, and it really, by Three Sisters Irrigation District, for example, and really results in lower water usage and great savings economically. But, and I'm not sure if, and Angelina has asked this question, if we're looking at real property, is micro hydro considered real property, or can it be removed? It seems like that would be the burden of proof right there. If the micro hydro pieces could be removed, then it would not be considered real property.
Yeah, boy, I feel like we're sort of diving out into sort of waters that are over my head a little bit on this one.
Yes. So it's always a case-by-case basis. It seems that you have to look at every situation.
And that's part of the role of the program administrator is really to help sort of evaluate case by case. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but whenever I talk to a lawyer, the answer is it depends. And so that's really save yourself $100,000 on the law degree. It's a fact-based inquiry, so you need to know the facts of the inquiry. So I would say maybe is the answer to that question.
Maybe, yes. So when we're talking about, and once again, if anyone has a question, feel free to put it into the Q&A or make a comment in chat. We're continuing to look for those. So if we're looking at administrators and what they might do, it seems like these people that we're looking for administrators would need to have certainly some expertise in financing and how to work with loans and securing them on properties, recording them on properties. It seems like that person could be a part-time person in the interim, or how do you envision that happening statewide? You mentioned the Green Bank, and I know that there are efforts underfoot in Oregon to make that happen. I don't know the status of that now, and you might be closer to that. But what do you see as some potential steps to making that happen to get a statewide administrator for Oregon?
Well, we've been meeting with the Department of Energy and Business Oregon, along with various motivated counties, to discuss what it would look like to have a unified program administrator in Oregon. And so I would say those conversations are pretty early in discussions. And I don't want to make it, you know, if for example, Deschutes County or Bend, Oregon sort of motivated and they're going to, you know, go their own pioneering way, then that's fine, of course, and that's perfectly within your rights. But I think what I'm hoping is that counties and cities who are interested in these programs are going to kind of band together, and we're going to put pressure on the state to help us make this program really easy, not only for cities and counties to implement, but also for the participants in the programs, building owners, capital providers, contractors, et cetera. And because they really want to make it consistent across the state, so we don't have market confusion. There's not different rules in Bend than there is in Portland, you know, that kind of thing. And also we're you know, we punch above our weight, but we're a small state. And so when we think about, you know, markets outside of the city of Portland, it's kind of hard to imagine that much interest from lenders without sort of kind of unifying the state into one big marketplace.
Yes. And so we have another question. Are projects, solar projects, grid tied, or can they also be standalone projects off grid?
Yeah, that's an interesting. So really, it just depends on the type of property. So as long as the property is a commercial property, yeah, it certainly could be a standalone. There's no requirement that it be grid tied.
And we had a question earlier in that cities. Then can cities do this without could the city of Bend, for example, pass an ordinance, and that would be the next step, wouldn't it, to actually enable the CPACE administration? Could the city of Bend do that without Deschutes County, or could any other city in Oregon do that without the county support?
The answer to that is yes. Let me look for the specific statutory reference. It's ORS 223680. I'll put that in the chat here, and that statute specifically says that cities and counties are eligible to implement these programs.
So then the county, the associated county, would pretty much, by this law, would pretty much be required to implement what the city has prescribed.
Yeah, and the role for the county in this case is going to be recording, and they do that all the time anyway, right? I mean, like, if you want to record a lien against a property, it's relatively straightforward to do, and so that'll be the role of the county. Beyond that, they don't really have to be involved. Again, I mentioned that the way we have arranged the program here in Oregon is not tied to the property taxes. We thought initially that we would tie to the property taxes. Property tax law, for any of us on the line who have looked at it, is exceedingly complicated in Oregon. For a variety of reasons I'd be happy to go into if people are interested. I suspect not. But that's why we went this other route that's available to us in the statute.
Okay, and I want to remind people that there's been quite a bit of material that's been put into the chat. You are able to go into that and copy and paste it into a Word document on your computer if you'd like to do that. But before we end today, if I'm not going to see any more questions coming up, I am going to close with hopefully a comment from each of you. But John, one additional question too. If any city or county would like to enable this legislation, you certainly have samples of an ordinance that you did with the state of Oregon. Can you talk about the steps that they would need to take legally?
Yeah, it's relatively straightforward. once you've kind of decided about how you're going to administer the program, you really then all you need to do is pass some enabling legislation. It's going to depend a little bit on the circumstances within your jurisdiction. For example, Multnomah County, the statutes require that you designate a treasurer. Multnomah County, we don't have a treasurer, where we didn't have a treasurer, so we had to designate our CFO as the treasurer. So, it's going to be a little bit specific depending on the particulars of your location, but it's relatively straightforward to do. And I'm putting my email in the chat here. So if you are an administrator within the local community and you want to talk through how you would set this up, I'm happy to do that.
Great, thank you so much. And Lori, do you have anything you would like to close with?
Just to say that we haven't passed an ordinance here in Bend yet, but we're in the process of trying to do so that we can start moving forward with CPACE and finding the ways that it can help benefit our community, especially with affordable housing, because that's an issue that has been a hot button item here in our community for a while. So finding ways to financially incentivize both owners of buildings to make clean energy improvements for the clean energy purposes, but also just to economically provide a break for our low-income individuals who are looking for that is a great way to go. And we're happy to work with our friends over there in Multnomah County to help us make sure that we're moving forward in kind of the best way possible.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. Outstanding presentations. Now, I would like to move to hear another word from 350 Deschutes, host of the